What I want to go over with you today is just a broad overview of a communications plan. I think it's important for us to kind of understand where we're headed and the big picture and kind of a roadmap, if you will. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on every single page because it's really long, but this is just kind of a first glance at communications in action. Um, like as I've said, I worked for the city of Nacogdoches, and although not directly related to agriculture, everything that we do in this class can be applied to other industries. So when it comes to messaging, when it comes to finding your target audiences, when it comes to goal setting, when it comes to doing market research, any and all of the above, it's really, really important that you think about this class beyond just the context of ag. Obviously, that's most of the examples that we're going to use, but this was a communications plan that I felt like was really tangible and easy to understand. In my role at the city, I had to um, appeal to a wider array of audiences, and I had to explain what I was doing to people who had no concept of communication whatsoever. The fire chief, the police chief, the city engineer, people who work on sewer and water lines. I mean, the crazy differences in our fields of study. And so I really had to do a good job of articulating the importance of what I do and the importance of why I even was in that role. Why does the city need somebody talking about communications and telling the story of the city? So, this was a document I put together that just kind of illustrates how the City of Nacogdoches Communications Department communicates with residents and businesses and proactively identifies emerging issues and engages in long-term communication strategies. So, it was important for me to give a history. So what I found, and this is just real talk, guys. What I found was that um, I came along and nobody had ever really done strategic communications. They hadn't ever really put pen to paper and said, this is how we're going to do what we're going to do. And so I had to start somewhere, and that is not this document. So I started in 2015 was where I kind of entered, but we had a campaign that was taking place. We worked with the advertising agency here in town in Nacogdoches, and we continued to work through that. But when I kind of just lumped this into my tenure at the city, at this time, I was getting ready to do 2020 to 2022. So this was the end of 2019 when I wrote this. However, we could not have planned for COVID-19 pandemic, haha. And so we kind of put this on pause. So the timeline has changed. As you can see here, it went from October 2019 to September 2022. That obviously changed, but it was important to kind of give some context and some information here. The reason why that was important, let me go back real quick, was my entire budget was paid for through tax dollars. And so if you go into public administration of any type, whether you're working for the extension service or you're working for the state, a state agency, forest service, wherever you end up, if you're using tax dollars, you have to be even more diligent in terms of giving your feedback and giving goals and explaining to people why you're doing what you're doing, because there's only so much money. It's not like you're working for a private industry that can allot money and you don't really have to answer for it like you do with tax dollars. So I talked a little bit here about transparency and communication efforts to date. I'm going to kind of roll through some of these things because we're going to look at them in depth as the course goes on. But again, I'm just kind of giving you a roadmap here. So I equated myself, I was a department of one, sometimes I had some interns, as a full service communication agency. So we did media and public relations, marketing. I also did a great deal of work in terms of just reputation management for the city. So dealing with rumors, dealing with educating the public about how things worked, things like that. So it was a pretty complicated, kind of a jack of all trades situation, but I loved it. We'll talk about a SWOT analysis in this course. And so here you can see, I'm also going to upload this. And so you can kind of look at it more in depth if you want to dig into something a little closer. But just identifying the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the department and of the city. And so this was important in terms of like showing city council, showing taxpayers, showing my counterparts what we're doing well and what we can improve upon. This is a very important strategic piece because this can be your roadmap to deciding your steps in terms of what you're going to do for the marketing for the next few years. And so if you see an opportunity or you anticipate a threat, then you can prepare for that. We will talk about and we will continue to discuss at length understanding your audience: employees, city council, citizens, and media. Me articulating my audience here is so important when it comes to shaping messages, because the things that we say to the media and the things that the media cares about that would in turn go to the public is different than the things that we would say to the employees. Not that they're not true or that we're changing our story, but that the priority messages, the employees care about raises, they care about benefits, they care about time off, they care about, the direction the city is headed in. The media cares about new streets, new playgrounds, the city council agenda, things like that. And so just being able to articulate these little buckets of people, if you think of them as buckets of like, okay, I have employees over here, city council over here, citizens in the media. Then when I have some a story to tell, I can decide who I'm going to employ or who I'm going to give this message to. It may be all four, but sometimes it may not be. And I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. So I've taken a little breakdown here. One of the challenges is you have to be everything to everybody. So to be able to say, okay, city council is a bucket, employees is a bucket, citizens, faculty, and students. I highlight faculty and students because I think that the things that SFA wants from the community can sometimes be different than a retired couple that may live in Nacogdoches that just moved here. And so being able to articulate that is important in our messaging. Business owners, developers, and strategic partners, that's a big one in terms of bringing new businesses to town. What kind of story do we want to tell those people? News media, and then boards, commissions, and committees. So I break this down. Assets, these are called communication assets. So we look at internal communication. So that's my employee bucket, right? City events, the employee newsletter, the employee portal, and department meetings. Those are all ways we communicate information to internal media. Owned media, that stuff, it literally is what it says. Those are things that I own. I own my website. I own the Nextdoor page. I own news releases. I am in charge of those things completely. I share a lot of social media because people can comment, people can ask questions. So all social updates other than the posts that I'm putting out on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube are all shared with other people. Stakeholders in the public can interact with us. And then paid media, if we buy ads, if we purchase billboards, anything like that. And then earned media, that's where the public relations side of communications comes in. Word of mouth, newspaper, things that are, you're earning it. So the newspaper calls you and you want to tell your story that week and they're going to print a story about you. You're not paying for it. You've earned it. This is where those really great organic stories and good public relations comes in, is we're not paying to tell you our story. We've earned it. And so just kind of think about that distinction as you walk through this class. We will talk all about messaging, and we'll do a whole unit on messaging. But this is important as you think about how do I want to say something and what do I want to say. So we'll unpack that a little bit. But we have some key concepts. Nacogdoches values citizen input. Nacogdoches plans for the future. We celebrate and embrace diversity. If there's something to say that week, I kind of went week by week in terms of what we were going to talk about to the public, what type of events do we have, what was I going to talk to the media about, things like that. And so you kind of go back to these categories. Most times everything fits within one of these categories, but usually if it doesn't fit into something like this, they're all pretty broad. So it just kind of gave us a direction that, you know what, Nacogdoches cares. That's the big overreaching goal here. But we also have all of these little categories here where we can put stories and we can think about our messaging. So in addition to these messages, there's some evergreen issues. Evergreen means it never dies. It never goes out of style. These happen a lot. So we have our legislative agenda, historic preservation, public safety. So fire and police, those are things that are always having new stories and new things happen, but I can't tell you what they are right now because they haven't happened yet. So these are some more relevant categories that I would use to kind of guide our conversations online and with the media. So, what are we trying to do? This is what I was talking about a minute ago. If you are using public dollars and even private dollars, having a goal and being able to understand what you're trying to do, how you're trying to do it, and the things that you're actually going to do to get there, and then finally how you're going to measure it is the most important part. So we'll walk through this again and unpack it a little bit, but here we have a goal, an objective, a strategy, and these tactics. So these tactics are like our to-dos. So what are we doing? What are the things that we are checking off? We're going to respond to the media in a timely manner. We're going to assess opportunities to host media events. Check, check, check. How are we going to do this? How can I measure it? I can tell how many people from the media I've talked to and if they had an answer to their question within 24 to 48 hours. It was very, very measurable and realistic. So I have lots of goals here. Remember, this was a 2-year plan, so there was a lot of information happening here. But like here, we talked about elevating our image, having a cohesive brand. I was going to create a branding guide. It was going to be complete by May of 2020. Of course, this was written pre-pandemic, but these were the kind of things that we put in here. So this goes on and on because this is really the meat of the marketing plan. And this is where it really, really becomes important. So we continue on. And this was actually one of the things, and you'll hear me talk a lot about kind of calling in for help whenever you don't know exactly what you need to do. So I knew we needed more information about crisis communication, how we're going to deal with training and tools and how we're going to communicate during a crisis. But little did I know when we started working on this that we were going to get a real life training in terms of COVID-19 on how to inform our residents and protect organizations' stability and reputation in a time of crisis. Because right after I wrote this, I sent it off to the fire chief and the police chief and said, hey, we need to work on what are our actual to-dos. I have objectives, I have goals, but I need to help kind of fill this in. And then COVID happened. So this is real life, y'all. So yeah, that is just, I'm going to upload this, and I took most of these pictures, by the way. That one's my favorite. But I'm going to upload this and y'all can unpack it, look through it. You'll see elements of this throughout your modules. So I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for tuning in. Bye, guys.